Hello and welcome to Get Real Football Experts. I'm Dave Cres, and as always, I am joined by Louie, DiBi. Louie, how are you?
It's going good.
So today we are going over our top 15 fantasy running backs for the 2013-2014 season. We previously did our top 15 quarterbacks. You can check that one out. Then after this one, we'll have our receivers, top 15 receivers for fantasy, and we are currently throughout the whole thing, we were putting up our schedules. About halfway done with those. Just about to start the AFC once Louie gets the Rams video up. So let's get going on to our running backs. Louie, how about you give us your number 15?
All right, my number 15 running back is Steven Jackson with the Atlanta Falcons, a veteran that has put up a lot of impressive statistics in St. Louis. He's been a consistent 1,000-yard running back, but I think going over to Atlanta, I think it's really going to help him because receiving, he's going to be a big part of that, and also touchdowns, because touchdowns he's been having 4 or 5 a year in St. Louis. They're going to get more red zone touches, I think, in Atlanta, so I think he's a really good high number 2 running back and a low end number 1 if you're waiting on running backs.
All right, so my number 15 is Chris Johnson. He hasn't really been all that. Well, he had an all right year last year. I don't know the exact stats, but a few years ago he had the 2,000-yard running year, but then he's kind of slumped the past few years. But now now that the Titans have 2 new guards, that's gonna help him out. So I like Chris Johnson. He's a good number 2 running back, a high number 2 running back, like you said about Steven Jackson. So I like Chris Johnson. He's my number 15.
All right, my number 14 running back for fantasy football this year is Frank Gore from the San Francisco 49ers. Both Steven Jackson and Gore are veteran running backs. There are risks to these players because of the wear and tear that running backs take. But I think Frank Gore's been consistently a 1,000-yard receiver, posted at least 7 touchdowns. I think with the read option with Colin Kaepernick really has helped him, and I think it's going to continue. Their line's really good. Obviously, Joe Staley's one of the best left tackles in the league, and I think he's going to continue to be a consistent runner. But again, I don't know if he's a definite number 1. I think he's a really good number 2 because when you're looking for Gore, I think it's for that number 1 you need that guy that can be able to score over 15 to 16 points. And I think Gore has that ability, but I think he's just more of a consistent runner that always just is like more of a ground and pound, not the big play type guy. So I think he's a high end number 2 in my opinion at 14.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But for my number 14, I have Steven Jackson. I like Steven Jackson. He's been consistent, like you said, with 1,000-yard rushing. So if Michael Turner can be the 16th ranked running back and have I think 800 yards last year
and 10 touchdowns.
Why can't Steven Jackson have 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns? There's the difference. Clearly, Steven Jackson's the better running back than over Michael Turner in that system. With how much Turner put up, I don't see why Steven Jackson can't do better.
Yeah. All right. For number 13, for the running back in fantasy, I have Stephen Ridley for the New England Patriots, a young running back that really came into his own his first starting year last year with over 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns. I really like Ridley. I think he's, especially with all the weapons that the Patriots are losing, I think they're going to rely heavily on the run game. And I think in the red zone, the Patriots had the most touchdowns in the red zone out of any team in the NFL last year. And I think Ridley's a huge part of that. Hoping that he can be more effective in the pass game because he only had 51 total yards last year in receiving-wise. If they can do that, because Shane Vereen has that ability, so they might be taking him off of third downs. I think he's a high-end number 2. I think he has the ability to be a number 1 since he's still young, and they're going to rely on him heavily. And I think he's definitely, he's a very consistent runner, but at the same time, he has that breakout ability speed, but I'd like to see him improve on his receiving game.
All right, my number 13 is Frank Gore. You had him one spot below at 14. Like you said, he's got one of the best offensive lines in the league, so that's going to help him out. Also, running backs who play with the read option seems to benefit them, so that's also going to help him out. And he's a power back. He can score on the goal line, so I do like Frank Gore. I think he's a really good number 2 running back if you get him there. And if you get him as your number 1 guy, you better have. It wouldn't be that bad if you have depth at every other position. So he's a low end number 1. I think high end number 2.
Yeah, my number 12 running back for fantasy is Chris Johnson for the Tennessee Titans. What? Oh, okay, yeah. I don't know. Do you think he can get double-digit touchdowns again? Because I feel like his stats have been going down really from each year.
I don't think he can because now that the goal line carries are probably going to go to
Sean,
Green.
yeah.
So I think maybe like 7, right?
Yeah,
Except
so
a lot of his touchdowns are on breakout runs. So
true. I mean, yeah, if he can hit the home runs, but the reason I have him 12 is because of that what they've done in the offseason. They picked up Andy Levitri, who's from the Buffalo Bills. I know you know was a very productive guard, and also they in the first round they took Chance Warmack out of Alabama. So I mean, the pieces are there for Johnson to succeed, and he has still been a consistent 1,000-yard rusher, but his yards have gone down significantly after that 2,000-yard season. But I think he's going to bounce back this year. I think he is. I think he's. I mean, you could consider him as a number one, but again, some of these later guys, like these guys, have the potential, but are probably better off being a number 2 guy. And I think he would be a great number 2 if you could have a guy like one of these guys ahead of him. As if he's your number 2, I think you're in a good spot because I think he has the potential to break out and become a number 1 runner again.
All right, so my number 12 is Steven Ridley. You had him at 13. Like you said, he can improve on his pass game. And I don't like him as a number 1 guy. Probably a good number 2. And I might even have him. I might actually disagree with myself and have Gore ahead of him there. I might want to change that, but he will get most of the carries, even though they kind of have a loaded backfield. He's clearly the number 1 guy. And like you said, they do score a lot in the red zone, and they like to use Ridley. I owned him last year. He was my number 2 guy, but I was behind Michael Turner, so he kind of had to step up. So I liked him last year. I think he can be even better than he was last year.
Yeah. For my number 11 running back is Matt Forte from the Chicago Bears. I really like his receiving ability. He's really taken a lot of the receptions, and he's a great red zone carry. As long as I just wish Michael Bush wasn't there to take away some of the carries.
Yeah.
So I like him as a number 1. I think if he can stay healthy, but I have him as a number 2 running back because he's had his injury concerns over his span of his career that he hasn't been able to shake off. I mean, you have to take caution with him. I think you have to have another consistent runner with Forte as you're taking a little bit of a risk, but he's definitely got the ability to run and catch the football. So I think he's definitely a high-end number 2 for sure, but I think he could definitely be considered number 1 in some leagues, especially with PPR leagues. I mean, because he gets a lot of receptions, and I think he's definitely a big part of that Chicago Bears offense. So I like him at number 11 ahead of some of these guys because of what he does. He's very versatile.
Yeah, I also have Forte at number 11. And 2 years ago, I think in 2011, he was the leading receiver for their team.
Yeah.
Well, now that Brandon Marshall's there, that's not going to happen probably for the next few years, but as long as Marshall's there. But he's still, I mean, last year he was a 1,000-yard receiver or running back. And that's why I like. He hasn't over his years in the NFL. He hasn't had a season under 900 yards. But his touchdowns, he only had 5 last year. So if he can get that like double digits, just imagine how good he could be. I think he's a number 1 running back. Maybe, yeah, I think he should be. I think there's good 11 or 12 number 1 running backs in fantasy. So yeah, I like him as a number 1.
Yeah, he has the size to be a red zone runner too. It's just with Michael Bush there, he's going to be taking away the carries in the red zone, which I don't really like. I mean, when they picked him up, but yeah, like you said, if he can bring up his touchdowns, he'll be good. So my number 10 running back is Alfred Morris, the second-year running back for the Washington Redskins. He had over 1,600 yards last year and double-digit touchdowns. Definitely benefited from that read option with RG3. A lot of people are saying that he's part of the Shanahanigans or whatever with the running back rotations. I don't know. I think when you put up those stats as a rookie, I definitely think you're guaranteed the starting spot. I definitely like him as a number 1 guy. I think he's a very consistent runner. He's a really good red zone guy. I think with RG3 and the read option, it really helps him. I think that was one of the big pieces of why he was so successful. And I think if they continue that, if RG3 can remain healthy, I think he's going to be as dominant as he was last year, if not better. I think he's a number 1 running back in most leagues.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also have Morris, number 10. I mean, it does raise some concern with the Shanahan there, so, but I don't think it really should matter for him. After he did that well last year, he's pretty much secured that number 1 running back position. But do you think he'll benefit, or do you think he'll benefit or lose some with RG3 out if he's out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're going to rely on him more with Kirk Cousins as quarterback, but I just think how deadly that read option was with Washington. I think they were the best ones that ran it. So I would honestly think it negatively affects him in the long run because I think if this injury keeps lasting, I don't think he's going to be as dominant.
Yeah, I agree with that. So number 9, Louie, how you yours?
All right, so for my number 9 is LeSean McCoy for the Philadelphia Eagles, coming in now with a new head coach in Chip Kelly who loves to run the football. He's going to bring in a little read option as well. Granted that Michael Vick or Dennis Dixon starts, but LeSean McCoy 2 years ago was one of the best runners in the league. Had 17 touchdowns from the line of scrimmage, total receiving and running. He was probably the best runner in most leagues. And then coming off last year, a very disappointing year based on injuries and just not getting the ball enough. I think he's going to have a huge bounce back year this year. I think they're really going to rely on him on the offense. I think he's a number one running back. He's one of the best receiving running backs as well in the league, and I think he's going to get all the red zone carries. I think you're definitely going to see him in double digits touchdowns this year. And if he can stay healthy, which last year he did have that bad injury in the end of the year to take him out for the rest of the year, I think he's definitely a number one running back, and I think he's going to bounce back to where he was 2 years ago, because last year with Andy Reid in the system, he just didn't get the ball enough.
Yeah, the problem with McCoy last year was that he didn't score enough also, right? How many did he have last year?
He only had 4 total, only 2 rushing.
Yeah, but
that just shows how he didn't get the ball.
So.
But yeah, and that was later in the season. It just shows Andy Reid just wasn't committed to the run, I think. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, so hopefully Chip Kelly is for fantasy owners with him. But my number 9 is Trent Richardson. He's definitely the biggest piece on the Browns team, but that's not always good for fantasy because that means they're gonna put more pressure on him. Because if you're a guy like Alfred Morris, the main purpose of the defense is to stop RG3, so that's gonna limit Trent Richardson, but he's still gonna be a very good number 1 running back. I think he has potential. His potential could move him up so that's I've seen places where he was number 4 and stuff, so I think he can stay down there at 9, but I think I wouldn't be too surprised if he was up there in the top 5.
Yeah, my number 8 is C.J. Spiller for the Buffalo Bills, and I really like he was very explosive last year. He had over 1,000 yards, and he did not get as many carries as some of these other running backs. I think if they can just commit to him, they still do have Fred Jackson in the backfield, and I think he will take some of the carries away.
Yeah.
But I think they should just start committing to Spiller because of how explosive he is. He can play receiver as well. I mean, you saw him a lot of the time last year lining up as a receiver. So he's got the versatility. He's definitely a number 1 running back. The only thing that concerns me is Fred Jackson because Spiller is very durable, and I think that offensive line is one of the best in the league. I think still, even with the loss of Andy Levitri, as long as Eric Wood can stay healthy, I think this guy's a definite number 1. And like you said about Richardson, Spiller has the potential to move up the boards, maybe even ahead of a guy like Ray Rice if he just doesn't get the ball.
Yeah, I mean Spiller's my number 7 guy, so I'll get to him in a minute. But first, I'll give you my number 8. It's LeSean McCoy. Like you talked about him, if he can get back to the way he was 2 years ago, then he'll be amazing. I think he can because he's also very good at receiving, and I think he's gonna have a lot better year than last year. Yeah. But all right, so back to Spiller he's my number 7. I think he's the most explosive running back in the NFL. Just watching all of the Bills games last year, honestly, so many of his plays he just broke away. He's so fast, and there is some concern about Fred Jackson, but the only concern about Jackson is the carries away because all Jackson does is run up the middle. He gets those crap yards that really you got to give him more credit because those are the hardest things to get. So I mean, Spiller's gonna go to the outside and stuff, and he's makes all his moves and stuff. But Jackson gets those carries up the middle. I really like Spiller. He's definitely a number 1 running back in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. So my number 7 is Trent Richardson from the Cleveland Browns. Like you said about him, he does have the potential to move up the charts. But with the injury concerns, as he had those rib injuries that he played throughout the whole season last year, I owned him, so I went through that. So I understand where he is at. With some of these other young running backs like Doug Martin and Morris, like you said about Morris, he's not the center of attention on the offense.
Yeah.
Richardson is, and he's the main target. If Brandon Weeden in the passing game can start getting going, I think that's going to help Richardson. And what I like about Richardson as well is he's a really good receiver. He's very underrated in that sense. He's a 3-down runner, and he's going to be on all downs. And I think the red zone, I mean, he had double-digit touchdowns last year. If he didn't get injured in that last 2 games, he would have had over 1,000 yards, as he had 950 yards total. I think he's definitely going to be a number 1 running back. But the injury concerns are there, so you do have to keep that in mind with Richardson. But like you said, the potential is really good there with some of these young guys like Spiller and Richardson. They have the potential to move up the charts. So you really want to get one of these guys, I think, in your fantasy drafts.
You know what? You have Trent Richardson on your team in our keeper league. Yeah. I have Marshawn Lynch, so I'm pretty happy with we should both be happy with our running backs. But
Very consistent runners, yeah.
I mean, because basically, if you don't get a running back in the first round in any draft, that you're gonna have a bad year.
Yeah, because the other positions are deep. So if you're taking one of those high end, everybody else is taking running backs probably. So that's probably not the best strategy. You really need to take running backs early.
Yeah, and I realized that last year because I really thought my team was good last year. I had Aaron Rodgers at QB, and then my receivers at one point were AJ Green, and Julio Jones. But then my running backs were Michael Turner, Darren McFadden, Steven Jackson, Steven Ridley, Doug Martin. But that was before he broke
out, yeah.
So those are my four main guys, and I also had Cedric Benson before he got hurt. So those five guys I had going. And if you don't have that big guy, I mean Martin, if I kept him, I traded him away. That's complicated, but I traded him away, and at those points you need a big number one running back if you want to win.
Yeah, you want to have at least two consistent runners, and that number one you definitely want to be able to rely on, in my opinion, as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, but would you rather have a guy like? I mean, you proved to our league at least that receivers are sometimes better than running back because. I mean, who would you rather have, like a second running back or a low-end first receiver? Meaning, you and Marcus Colston, you played in the flex position sometimes. I don't know who over like Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis.
Yeah.
But, I mean, a lot of people put Green Ellis in there, but I mean, Colston's usually going to put up more points. So, also, I mean, you got to look at the receivers too.
Yeah, it depends on the situation you're in because I mean, sometimes if you have a number one receiver. I mean, you do want to stockpile running backs because they are probably the thinnest position because so many people want them. I think you might want to take the another running back. I really like receivers, but yet, granted, even though I took a lot of receivers last year, I still took a running back in the first round because you still need to get those guys. But I mean, receivers deep, so I think you could wait. But I like what the potential of some receivers can be. But I think running back is just so key that you got to pick them up early.
Yeah. All right. So my number 6 guy now is Doug Martin. Like I said, I had him before he broke out, and that's the reason I have him at 6. A lot of people have him higher than that because if he did what he did at the beginning of the year, I mean, he was consistent, but he was giving me like 9, 8, 10, 11 points around that. I mean, for a number 1 guy, that's good for a number 2 guy, but if he plays like he did towards the end of the year, he'll be an amazing number 1 guy. But after seeing what he did there, and I also think that he is a good candidate for a sophomore slump. So. I'm not a huge fan of Doug Martin, but I still think he's a very good number 1 running back.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from there. My number 6 is Ray Rice for the Baltimore Ravens. And I have him at 6 because, honestly, I really loved what I saw in Bernard Pierce last year in the playoffs. He took away some of the carries, and he really looked good when he did it. My reasoning, I mean, Ray Rice, he goes to the middle a lot, but he definitely can be in the receiving game as well. And
Rice up the middle.
Yeah, there you go. So that pretty much says it. But I mean, but that kind of is something with Ray Rice that, I mean, the explosive ability can be there at times. If he can increase his touchdowns again, I think he's going to be a number 1 runner again. Yeah. But that Bernard Pierce is really good, and the Ravens really like what they have in him. If they move kind of do a 1-2 punch, kind of like what they did back when McGahee was there. McGahee was taking all the red zone carries. If Bernard Pierce starts to rise and really produces, Ray Rice's stock value is really going to go down. But I really like him as a number 1 runner still because of what he's shown that he can do, and I think he'll continue to do that as long as he can remain as productive as he's been, because Bernard Pierce, I think, has a lot of upside, and I think you might want to look out for that. But other than that, Ray Rice is number 1 guy in my opinion.
All right, so your number 5 guy is Doug Martin, so you can talk about him.
Yeah, Doug Martin, like you said, has major sophomore slump potential, and I agree with you. Other than those 2 games where he had like over 50 points and 30 against Minnesota and Oakland, it might have not have been as great of a year. So, I mean, there was times when he was hot and there was times where he was not as good. So, but I think he's a number 1 running back because of what he showed. I mean, he's a receiver. He's got explosive speed. He's got the home run and play ability, and also he's a good red zone runner. With LeGarrette Blount gone, I think that's going to help. But like you said, it was the midst of 2 games that really racked up a lot of the points. Because other than that, he was somewhat productive, but he probably would not have been ahead of Richardson or Morris if he didn't have those 2 games. So I think he's a number 1 runner based on his potential, and the offensive line is very good in Tampa Bay, and they're going to rely on him. And but I like him ahead of Richardson and Morris because of the big play potential, and they're really going to give him the ball this year a lot. And I like him, but there is the risk for the sophomore slump. But I think definitely he's going to be a productive running back this year.
All right, my number 5 guy is Jamal Charles. I really like Charles. I think he can definitely be 4. I know that's where you have him. So he was how many yards did he had a very good season last year?
Like 1,600 yards, I
Yeah,
believe.
I think it was like 1,500.
Yeah, so still.
So he's the main piece of their offense, but they do have other pieces like Twain Bow in there, so that's also going to take some pressure away. But I just think he's such a good running back. He's one of the top, definitely a top 5 running back, and maybe even higher.
Yeah, I have Charles number 4. I mean, I think with Peterson, what he did coming back from ACL injury probably overshined what Jamal Charles did because he was coming off of an ACL tear as well.
Yeah, but the difference is Charles tore his ACL at the beginning.
True, but I mean, what he still did is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And he's got a strong offensive line. The first overall pick was Eric Fisher, so I mean, so you have him, but I think with the explosiveness, Alex Smith also. I mean, he's shown that the receivers are not as productive with him. I mean, he really likes throwing to the tight ends. I think they're going to rely on Charles. But the one thing you might got to keep in mind is Andy Reid's the head coach, and Andy Reid really likes to pass the football. So I think if Charles can remain a big piece in the passing game, I think he's a definite number 1 because of that explosive speed and agility. I think he's definitely a number 1 runner, and you can definitely rely on him this year. I think some people are concerned about the Reid thing, but as long as he can remain in the pass game, I think he's one of the best running backs in the league.
All right, so now my number 4 guy is Ray Rice. And like you said about Bernard Pierce, that's going to raise some concerns. He's a very good receiver too. I know if you remember last year on that 4th and like 27, he took that screen pass up. He's small, but he's very powerful, and he has some speed. So I like Ray Rice. I had him too, but I traded him. So I like Rice. Definitely number 1.
Yeah. My number 3 running back is Marshawn Lynch for the Seattle Seahawks. This is the definition of what I like in a running back: is consistent double-digit points. He's definitely a red zone target. He can break tackles. He's a good catcher. I mean, Marshawn Lynch is a complete package. I really like Lynch. And what I like about the Seahawks offense too is they rely on Lynch. But at the same time, it's not like Richardson where they don't have that ability in the passing game. The Seahawks can throw the football with Russell Wilson. They have Percy Harvin and Sidney Rice and Golden Tate. So the weapons are there, and I think that's going to take the load off of Lynch, but it's going to help him. And I think definitely he has the potential to get over 1,600 yards and double-digit touchdowns. He's just that productive. And I think he's got a good line, and I think he's definitely a number 1 running back. I mean, there is some debate that he could be below Charles or Martin, but I really like Lynch based on the consistency because you can always rely on him, and I think that offense relies on him as well. And his durability is good as well, so that is a really good sign of Lynch.
Yeah, I also have Lynch as my number 3. I mean, like all those reasons are said. I mean, the biggest downside is he's got to stay out of trouble.
Yeah.
He might get suspended this year for like a game. I remember reading up about that on the Roto World app that they said that he's got a trial in July that he might be facing suspension. And then last year there was a question if he was going to be suspended for week 1. So if he could stay out of trouble, he'd be perfect, but he just doesn't.
Yeah. All right, my number 2, and I think we both have this,
Yeah.
potentially because some people have been putting Arian Foster ahead. I know Fabiano has put him ahead. I have Foster at number 2 for the Texans. I mean, the Texans do rely on him a lot. He's a great receiver. I mean, double-digit touchdown. He's a complete package. I mean, he puts up the stats as well as Peterson does. But the durability issues are there. He has battled some injuries over the past couple of years. I think he's the 2nd overall pick in most drafts. And I like Peterson better because of with the ability. 2,000 yards rushing last year, and that offense really relies on him. The Texans have Andre Johnson there and DeAndre Hopkins, so Matt Schaub is going to throw the football as well. And obviously there's still Ben Tate that's there to take away some of the carries. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I like Peterson better, but I think Foster is the 2nd best fantasy player in all of fantasy football. So he's a sure thing, and I don't think you have to worry about anything about him being a bust at all.
Oh yeah, Foster. He's proven himself just like Peterson has, and they're clearly 1 and 2. There's discussion for everything else, but there's no other discussion who the top 2 running backs are. I personally like Peterson better for what he did last year. He's not going to do that again because that's just impossible.
Yeah.
But, well, not impossible. It's very hard to do, clearly.
Yeah, he said 2,500 yards. I don't think that's happening.
But still, Foster 2, Peterson 1.
Yeah. My number 1 is Peterson, because for obvious reasons. I mean, what he did coming off of an ACL injury last year is just unbelievable. Like you said, the stats are probably going to go down because you're not going to see a consistent 2,000-yard runner. If anybody can do it, I wouldn't put it past him though. But I like 1,700 to 1,800 yards. The touchdowns are going to be there. With the loss of Percy Harvin, I think that's going to help Peterson. But they do have Greg Jennings there to stabilize the offense. But I mean, there's no questioning Peterson's the best in fantasy. I just think he's the best, better than Foster because of what he's done in the past years, and best running back in the league.
Yeah, all right. So before we wrap this up, how about you give us one sleeper running back for this year?
A sleeper, and I think a lot of people though have this guy in mind, is Lamar Miller for the Dolphins. I mean, with Reggie Bush gone, and Daniel Thomas just has proven time and time again that he's just not a reliable running back. I like him to break out. I really liked what I saw in him when he got the ball last year. He's got good receiving skills, and I think he's a number 3 running back at low end number 2 if he potentially pans out to what they want him to be. But I think he's a flex option for now, a bench spot. But I think you could definitely he's a potentially sleeper that could break out this year.
Yeah, I also like Lamar Miller. That's the thing, like, if everyone says he's a sleeper, is he really a sleeper anymore?
Not really. I mean, because everybody knows about him, but at the same time, you're still going to see him drop in most drafts. That's why I still think he's a sleeper, because even though people know about him, they're still not going to take him over these guys that are in the top 15, obviously. So I think he's got way more potential than someone like Benjarvis Green-Ellis, who now has a guy like Giovanni Bernard looking behind him that might be taking away a lot of the carries. Lamar Miller doesn't have that, and I think that's why I like him as a sleeper.
Yeah, here's your another sleeper who I think a lot of people haven't really looked at, Daryl Richardson for the St. Louis Rams.
That's a good one.
I mean, Isaiah Peed might take some, he'll take some carries, but he still should be productive. Peed's suspended for the first game, so that just means Richardson's going to be a very good week 1. So I like Richardson as a sleeper, maybe a number 4 running back. But I mean, he's no like starter. That's why I'd consider him a deep sleeper.
He could potentially pan out to be a flex option, but you just got to see him get the football first, like you said. You got to see him as a workload starter, because last year obviously he was behind Steven Jackson.
Yeah.
All right, so that's going to do it for today's Get Real Football Experts podcast, Fantasy Focus Edition, Top 15 Running Backs. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/NFL Experts. Also, check out our podcast on GetRealFootball.com on the side, The Football Experts. Also, they might be popping up as articles now in the front page. Follow me at DiBi Sports Talk, Dave at Dave Cres Sports. Check out Dave's Bills blog.
Yes.
Realbills.blogspot.com. Realbillsnow.blogspot.com. Really good Bills articles there and a podcast. Check out my blog at eaglesportstalk.blogspot.com. And I think that's it.
Yep.
Thanks, football fans. It's been real.